My apologies, I was counting. We are at 5, we need 7, so not quite.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and officially call today's meeting to order and just kick things off today. And then if we get 2 additional participants, we'll go ahead and move with the agenda to approve the minutes from May's committee meeting. But we have a guest with us today, Ken Mall with EDSI. I thought it would be really great if we could go around the room, do a quick introduction just so he knows who's here and who he's talking to today. I'll kick it off, and then if we can just hand it to someone else that's on the screen and just keep introductions going. Hey everyone, Kaylin Lane, Field Coordinator with the Ford Family Foundation, proud co-chair of this committee, and I also serve on the East Cascade Works Investment Board. I'll hand it over to you, Craig.
Good afternoon, everybody. Craig Pope, Polk County, Oregon Commissioner, and serving on WTDB Board and the CIC, and I'll kick it off to Brent.
Brent Kell, Chief Executive of Valley Immediate Care. I also serve as Board Chair of Rogue Workforce Partnership, which is our local workforce investment board. Ashley.
Thank you. Ken, you and I met, but I'm Ashley Espinoza. I'm the Executive Director of Lane Workforce Partnership, and I'm also staff alongside Todd for the kick. And I will pass it off to Ann.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Mercero, and I serve on the WTDB, sorry, I can't get it out, board, and I'll kick it over to Susie.
Good afternoon. I'm Susie Calhoun with the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, and I am the manager of the Tribal Vocational Rehabilitation Program. I'm a member of the State Rehab Council and a descendant of Genesee, like some of you. Good afternoon.
Paul, let's hand it to you for introductions, please. Hey, Paul, can you hear us? Paul, are you there? I'm not sure. All right,
I think
Todd,
he gave you a thumbs up.
Paul's here.
There he is.
There he is.
Hey, Paul, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Paul Brown. I'm based in Portland. I'm on the board for Work Systems, and I work in high tech.
Great. Todd?
Hey, everybody. Todd Nell, Director of the Workforce and Talent Development Board. I will toss it over to Tara, who I saw just joined. We're doing intros, Tara. And if she's not hearing, which it appears as such, let's go over to Aaliyah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Sobolowski. I'm Executive Support for the Office of Workforce Investments and Board Admin for the WTDB. And I'm happy to announce we have reached quorum as I pass it over to Clay, who I believe cannot verbalize, so he can put us in the chat, and I'll hand it over to Ken. There he is. Right. I was like, I read his note.
All right, Ken, floor is yours to introduce yourself.
Right, thank you all. And I apparently am having some toggling with my internet connection, so if you lose me, I'll try and get right back. But Ken Mall, I'm a managing partner with EDSI. Leading this project for this assessment project across the state. Very excited about it. I know with some of you on this call, we've been having some conversations already, deep in kind of trying to figure out the big next steps of the project. So excited to talk a little bit about that. A little bit about EDSI and myself. I have been working in the workforce system since 1994. So I've been around a while. My organization, we actually have done consulting work and advisory services at the state level for about 25, 26 different states, somewhere in there. We've also done some work with the National Governors Association, with NOB. So we've been around a while. We do also run workforce programs in several states. So I know for you all, thinking about the frontline worker in our job centers and what they do and how they do that job and how they service our customers. My company employs about 700 of those people in 10 or 11 different states right now doing that work. So very much understand the workforce system and what it's intended to do and the legislation and how to get there. And then working at the state level on policies and implementation and technology. So we have a really good sense of how this all works together. So very much looking forward to working with you all.
Great. Thanks so much for being here, Ken. And Tara, are you there? All right. Well, let's go ahead and entertain a motion at this time to approve the minutes from the May committee meeting. Was everyone able to review those in the packet that was sent out by Aaliyah? Thank you, Anne. Craig? Excellent. Is there a motion from the floor to approve those minutes as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Anne. Is there a second?
Second, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. All those in favor, if you can signal or say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Anyone wishing to abstain? Minutes pass unanimously. All right, Ken, the meeting today is mostly about getting to know you, a little bit about the plan, and the assessment rollout. So the floor is yours. And you are muted.
Of course I am. There we go. All right, so I've prepared a couple of slides for today. I'm not a big fan of doing too much by PowerPoint, but we'll get started this way. I think you're all familiar with what the purpose of this assessment is and what we're trying to accomplish. I always like to level set with my team on why we're doing things and what we're doing. And then we'll also be using some of this in the field as we get out and talk with people, because I'm sure a lot of the frontline folks and managers and leaders that we'll be talking with are somewhat engaged with this and understand what we're doing, but I just want to make sure what's driving it. What does this biannual assessment include? It really includes that assessment of the programs delivered by the one-stop partners. The good news is we've done this before in other states. We've got a really good sense of who are the partners, who the partners should be, and understanding that each state is also different. You're all going to have different local partners, and even your different local areas are going to have different partners from other local areas. So, when we start to dig into this, we're going to be uncovering I'm sure quite a bit of information that you may or may not know. These are the types of things that we're going to be looking for in our assessments. As we talk to folks, advancing racial, we want to look at the system's performance in advancing racial justice, equity, diversity, access, and inclusion. We'll be spending some time to define those terms as well to make sure that we're all on the same level as what we believe those terms mean. We want to look at aligning the state and local efforts to improve the system. And I actually have a couple of questions that I have for you all. So this is audience participation when we get to that point. On what does that look like for you? Supporting improvements that create a more comprehensive, public workforce system. I know that this effort, and with some of you, we've talked a lot about it. We really want to get, what can we do at the ground level, right, to improve the system? What processes can we improve? How can we help our employees, staff across the workforce system, make this a better system? Provide quality employment experiences and equitable outcomes for job seekers and businesses. A lot of times that's easier said than done. Our employers don't often have the best jobs that we're looking for, the highest paying jobs. So we often have to work with them to figure out what kind of career pathways we can create. And then sometimes we're working with participants that have barriers, and we have to work through those too. So we'll be looking at all that. And then how do we improve the quality of the workforce resources, programs, services, in the workforce system? To me, this sometimes get to be a question of, quantity over quality, right? Are we really trying to provide great services to, the people that need it the most? Or are we really trying to increase the number of people that we're providing services to? And what will the impact be on our system and our staff when we try to do those kinds of things? So I want to stop there for a second and see if anybody had any questions or kind of any additional thoughts before I move forward. Okay, I won't spend a lot of time on the deliverables. The first couple of bullet points there are ones that we're really working on, right now. We've committed to doing convenings in all of the local areas and regions. And when I say that, I do mean that we want to go and sit down and talk with everybody in person. That's the goal that we have. We're in the process, and I'll show you here in a second, of kind of mapping out the state and trying to get an idea of how we can make this happen as efficiently and effectively as possible, given the time frame that we have to do this work. Those convenings are going to, give us a lot of information on the ground. We have done this in 4 or 5 different states in the past, so we have a pretty good process that we're going to follow to get there. And a couple of additional deliverables that we'll be able to provide are things like, how do the programs map to each other, right? What are the processes that you'll find from kind of intake, referral, all the way through to, training, job seeker getting connected to a job? My experience is that, there's a lot of commonality across local areas, but there's also going to be some differences in how they work, and it's going to be helpful to kind of map out those differences. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are something that we're going to be working with you all and folks in the field to help us define. And then we'll get into the kind of the reporting. At one of the future meetings that we have, especially with the kind of the executive committee, is really starting to map out what that final report looks like. We kind of like to start with the end in mind. We've looked at all of the materials from the previous reports. We have some different ideas on how we want to approach this one. So, kind of starting with what does that table of contents look like, and what are the components of the report, and what are you looking to get out of it when we get there. Any questions so far? I know some of this is we've gone through this a couple times before. Okay. So the big item on this slide is the deadline. So our goal is to have this done by November 15th. So a lot of work to do to get us there. Gonna jump ahead here to a slide. I'll come back to the other one in a second. In our proposal, our project plan, and I have a big gigantic Gantt chart that I'm not going to bore you all with today, but there's really 4 major big tasks. Review documentation. We've done that. Todd, I actually think I still owe you a message about doing that. I'll get that to you. We did a kickoff meeting a couple of weeks ago with the committee and got that started. Now we're starting that data gathering mode. So, we're a little bit behind where we expected to be on that. But you'll also notice that purposely in our project planning, when we put the plan together, that we anticipated kind of trying to wrap up data gathering and doing all of our convenings by mid-August, leaving a few weeks before we really jump into the report part. So it gives us a little bit of buffer. In our initial communications with local workforce board directors and starting to kind of plan the logistics around the convenings, we've been kind of asked to see if we can't provide some flexibility on the scheduling. We did want to try and get them all done in the month of July. It's a heavy lift, so we're also looking at trying to push some of that off to August to try and see if we can't get there. So that's the schedule. We're pretty confident that we're going to be able to probably beat this schedule. Anyways, it's the big heavy lift is getting kind of past that convening phase and getting to getting to the meetings, really. Once we can get the meetings and collect that information, then that'll be helpful. Any questions here? This is just a list of the local workforce board directors. I'm kind of keeping this handy so I know who I'm reaching out to. Some of the activities that we've already completed. So, we did send out these are the outreach activities. We did send out an initial communication. You all sent, Todd sent, or Leah sent out a communication to the workforce board directors, kind of kicking off the project for us. We followed that communication with a communication of our own and outreach to all the local workforce board directors to kind of kick off the conversation. That happened last week, followed by kind of a mild flurry of emails back and forth, which actually resulted in a couple of things. One is I did talk with Heather Fitch earlier this week to kind of start that process. We actually have some dates that she's would like to try and work with in her area. So we started the scheduling process. And then through a couple of email conversations, the Oregon Workforce Partnership has a meeting on Monday that they've offered to provide some time on their agenda for me to speak with all the local workforce board directors while they're there to kind of work on the logistics together with that. So we're going to do that. So I'm appreciative of that. It was a meeting that they already had. I know I've mentioned to you guys before that I love to piggyback on stuff that's already in place, so I'm not consuming people's valuable time. So we're going to do that, and I think we'll be able to move that along pretty quickly. Just kind of talking through some more of the planning process after kind of the flurry of emails last week. We started to take a deeper dive into how would we try and work on these convenings, right? We know that in a lot of areas, there's multiple job centers. In your rural areas, they're really gigantic in some of them geographically. And, we understand kind of the need to try and get to every place and want to do that, but also understanding we may not be able to get everywhere. So we actually started to map out, how many job centers are in each of the local areas, how many comprehensive, how many affiliate, and start really thinking about, what makes sense to go, where to go and how to get there. Our goal is we want to go to where the people are. If, it's harder for people to come to us. Ideally we'd set up shop in one central location in each local area and have everybody come to where we're at, but that's not realistic, right? So what we're planning on doing is getting to as many of at least the comprehensive job centers as we can. These are going to be conversations with each of the local workforce areas on what's the best approach. I know when I talked to Heather Fitch, earlier this week, her idea was, hey, there's 2 job centers that we want to target. That's where most of her activity is anyways. We're going to go there. And then at the same time, there happens to be a board meeting that we can piggyback off of, so we can talk to the board at the same time and get some information from them. And then there was an employer function that was happening later that week that I think we can also kind of pull in together. So that's why we're targeting the week that we're targeting there. Did I get that wrong? Okay. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, it's minor. It's fict. There you go.
How do you spell it? Did I have it spelled right, just saying it wrong?
I think you had it spelled correctly, but weren't getting the
I'm saying it wrong.
in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
PhD. All right. Got it. All right. Okay. Moving along. So again, just kind of the map of the area, so we get a good idea of what we're doing. These are the dates that we're targeting to do the on-site work. Originally, the July dates were the ones we had offered, and then we kind of reassessed and looked back, and we're opening up some August dates that we hope we can get to. East Cascade works, the 22nd to the 24th. Southwestern Oregon responded to my survey on dates. So those dates kind of fit for what they were thinking. So we're going to try and target those dates. But the goal is to fill out the rest of the plan if we can. I'm going to fast forward here a couple of slides. I like to kind of model things out to see how they would work. So kind of an ideal model for us would be is that, we start, in the Portland area, for a few days, move over to Clackamas, and then the following week, Lane and East Cascade, then Rogue Workforce, and then Southwestern Oregon. And then in August, maybe this is what August looks like. Again, we have not talked with the local staff about this yet, but kind of modeling this out. This could work if it works for them. That makes sense. So questions that we do get quite a bit is, what do these on-site interactions look like? And again, we kind of start off with a plan, with a model of what we're trying to do, and we'll work with the local areas to do what's best for each local workforce area. But the idea is that we want to meet with WIOA staff, we want to meet with partner staff. If possible, we'd like to meet with some board staff, maybe the board chair, some leadership. We could CLEOs, there's other folks that we meet with. Meeting with employers, we want to try and do that as well. Some of the things that we'll be trying to figure out is, do we meet with the frontline local staff and partner staff at the same time, or are they separate meetings, right? Part of the conversation has been knowing that we don't want to shut down the job center while we're there, that maybe it's best to kind of blend the conversation. So some local staff, some partner staff, just to keep the place running, right? So we don't pull everybody off of their roles when we do that. But again, this is something that's going to be worked out locally as we kind of figure out the logistics. So again, I'm going to stop there. Any thoughts, questions? Does this sound at least like a decent approach so far? Okay.
I think it sounds great, Ken. Thanks. And I'll just jump in and underscore, I think, something I've said in a couple of previous meetings. There is a lot of interest right now, as some of you know, and even more recently, interest around economic development at the local level and at the state level. And it looks like changes may be brewing at Business Oregon. Not sure what that might look like. And of course, we have the Prosperity Council's final report coming out the end of this month. So I think to say then, after all that, I think it's important if we can do our best at the local level to engage with economic development folks, as well as regional solution representation at the local level. I think there's a big opportunity that we talked about at the Talent Summit for better connectivity and collaboration with those folks. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Perfect. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm just observing the calendar you were showing, which seems to be focused on the regional workforce boards. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of input to collect from the actual job centers. Are you thinking you'd like, sorry if I missed that, but are you thinking you'd like alternate between?
Yeah, we're actually more so thinking about going to the job centers. Where did that slide go? Yeah, so here's a number of job centers in each area, and what we're forming our plan around going to the job centers.
Got it. Okay. Sorry, I missed that.
Nope, you're good. Nope. Yeah, I mean, we can interface with the local workforce development, the executive directors. They're easier, they're more mobile than the staff is going to be. So if they're not co-located in the same place, we'll figure that out. But all the advice that you've given us so far is that you want this to be as focused on solutions from the front line as we possibly can. And that's great. That's great.
And
Okay.
very relationship driven.
And relationship driven. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I think what you'll find from our team is, because we have worked in the job centers, right? Everybody on my team has done a job in the job center. I mentioned to some of you before, I've done every job in the job center except for case management. So I've been a site manager, I've been a BSR, business services rep, I've been You know, I did the front desk. I've done them all over my 32 years in the business. And it's easy for us to relate to people once we get in there and we start talking. They're gonna be like, "Oh yeah, you get it," because we do. We've done that job. So one of the this is the audience participation part of this is, you know, as we're thinking about, you know, approaching this, you know, kind of some feedback from you all, you know, as you're thinking about what this could look like from your perspectives. I always like to ask the question, what are we solving for, right? So as we embark on this, what are we solving for? And I just put a few things up there to get your thinking going. Like, you know, are we trying to solve for, you know, program participants not completing training programs? You know, now that's a very measurable frontline thing, but it does impact our performance. It does impact things. Are we trying to solve for, you know, our employers not being engaged in the workforce system as much as we would like them to be? You know, and so part of the conversation then goes towards how do we get them more engaged in the system, and how can we do that from a continuous improvement perspective? You know, are we solving for that? Our We owe a title and other partners, we're just not working as effectively together as we could be. You know, that's something that we're trying to solve for. So I don't know if you all have some ideas on what you think we should be solving for. We would love to kind of entertain that. Anne, go ahead.
I think before I get to my thoughts, 'cause I need to brew on those for a second. These to me are like yes, no questions. And I think where we've kind of talked about in the past is getting to sort of the next level is what's the answer in terms of, or the plan in terms of, so what about that? So let's say the answer to all of those questions is no. Then what? So I think my question for you is, as you're doing these interviews, are you gathering information and then going to make recommendations based on that, but also based on kind of where the state's at, what the needs are, what we're hearing from economic development, or is that kind of out of the scope of the plan?
No, I think that's all in the scope of the plan, and that's the idea. And I'm glad you said no to all those questions, because then the next question is, well, what's the right question to ask, right? And those are the things that we'll be asking, of everybody. I think, you know, to give you an example, like if we talk to economic development, now this is what I've heard in other states when I've talked to economic developers about engaging with the workforce system. They'll say, well, they don't have candidates that are ready to go to work, right? So we don't like to work with them. You know, now if you talk to the job centers, they'll say we've got lots of candidates that are ready to go to work. That creates a disconnect, right? So that's something that we want to identify. Is that a disconnect? And then how do we resolve that disconnect, right? So those are the things that we'll be looking at. It could be, a referral. Maybe we have some, participants in the system that, have some barriers to work that voc rehab could fix. But when we refer them to voc rehab, we don't hear anything back. Again, that's something I hear in other states, but it's a disconnect in the referral process, right? And the data collection process. So those are the kinds of things that as we start to kind of peel back what the issues are that we're going to get to. But I guess kind of what I'm asking, Ann, is what are some of the things that we should be looking for, right?
Well, I think, yeah, and I think your second question, I think the answer is going to be, yeah, employers aren't. I mean, I was on the employer side, and I think we weren't engaged. And then the question is why or why not? And then how do
Right.
we solve for that? So I do think I think the why, is such an important after these, these issues. And I think there's ultimately the question that, is business thriving and are our citizens thriving because they're gainfully employed and able to have fulfilling lives. That's what I think we're solving for, is that we can, be a state that is, prospering because we have great jobs here.
Absolutely. All right, who is next? Tara?
Thank you. So I don't know if this gets some of my suggestions get quite to where Anne was going, but we could probably massage the way we phrase some of these questions in that way, because I agree with the comments that she made. And also, one of the things that you pointed out was where I was going to start. Um, and this comes from my experience being both at the field office level, managing centers, and kind of growing up in the OED, Workforce Operations Division, and then looking at from the statewide perspective. So putting my local office hat on, I think the forming a question around referrals and communication pathways, the ease of which that happens, and not even from a systematic perspective, because that's there are some system solutions that I think might already be in play, but just from a communication pathway and awareness. Does every workforce partner know who the other workforce partners are and what
Right.
we do to be able to make the right referrals and the right connections at the right time? I would then say, do we have, kind of playing off of that, are the right partners in the right conversations at the right time, and how do we engage and collaborate? And so my experience also from the local level is that not every workforce partner thinks of themselves as a part of the workforce system. And so how do we get everybody at the table that needs to be at the table to engage? And like one of the first things that comes to mind is like K through 12, right? Like workforce development actually should be starting in middle school. We shouldn't be waiting until people are needing their GED or beyond, kind of that point of having a basic diploma. So that I would see that as a possible connection. And then if we have all the right people in the right conversations, are we agreeing on what the needs are of the workforce system in Oregon, and looking at sectors and tying in business like Anne was talking about, and recognizing what the common goals are, or the most urgent goals, looking out like 5 years so we can develop the right training plans to connect with the growing industries. So there's like immediate needs that are happening now, but also like emerging needs that we can plan for, so we're not developing training programs and in 4 years turning out a bunch of trainees that no longer, there's an industry that no longer needs that kind of wave of support. And so so how are we having those conversations? Where is the right place for those to happen? Or really get into the nuts and bolts of here's the need, here's the strategy, and now who implements? Do we have the right people in the right spots for the implementation, for the rubber meeting the road? So that's my brain dump.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, I guess for question number 4, and this is kind of an age-old thing for me, is what's our ROI in true dollars? And I constantly ask the question, what are we spending? I mean, what have we spent in the last year versus what is our qualified deliverable? What's the actual bona fide metrics of what we've delivered? My belief is that on the employer side of things, maybe they're not engaged as much because they don't see true ROI. We use a lot of fancy words, and we put up a lot of graphs, but I don't think that we actually carefully analyze as a state how much money we're spending, both on the state level and federal investments, and then what are we getting back? And as a continuous improvement committee, I've been saying this over and over again, and I still don't see those metrics. So I don't know why state leadership isn't asking us to be more diligent on that, but I hope you will.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up metrics, because obviously being federal funds and the way they are, there's all the ETA common measures, right? But those are lagging indicators. That shows you how we did. That doesn't necessarily a metric that shows you, are we doing the right thing to get to those metrics? So those are some of the things that we'll be looking at, and we have had some conversations about, what metrics might be appropriate for your workforce system. And again, that's going to get to where your strengths and weaknesses are and what activities we want to perform, and how we want to do it. But the metrics themselves too, we don't want to over measure ourselves, but we want to be able to, provide some influence and some motivation for our staff to know what they're doing is working, right? Before we get out to that wage, gain, second quarter after exit or something like that, right? So those are just lagging indicators. Go ahead, Brent.
Yeah, I'd echo what Greg says. We've been asking for metrics for a long time, and I think we're really close to some agreements with the Department of Revenue to share some wage and payroll data, 10 years down the road, and actually a retrospective of what we've already spent. When we can put that wage and payroll data with training programs, we can really, and I think we will show some return on investment, but I'm confident that there's probably some areas where we're spending a lot on job creation or skilling up the labor force that are not showing any return on investment. So it'll enable us to put the money where it's going to be most effective down the road.
Yeah, great. I love it. I love it. Go ahead, Ann.
Not a suggestion on something that Brent just said made me think, and I'm trying to think of this example of something that happened the other day that you all would relate to, and I can't remember what it is. But anyway, it would be great if there are things that or that are in flight, like metrics, that if we are having some barriers, that there's a forum to sort of gather the why behind that and use the reporting to sort of push it forward. So for example, let's say that there's a group that's like, oh, sorry, we don't have enough money, or we don't want to share with you, or whatever. Where we're getting stuck and we can't get something done. And it's not just about metrics, it's about anything that's in flight that we're trying to get done. It would be really great to use the outcome of this report to really push that and to be bold about it and say, like, we're not getting cooperation from blah blah blah, to sort of get things unstuck. And so the people that would know, that could make them uncomfortable, but we have to find a safe way for them to be able to bring it up, but to be able to say, like, we can't move this thing forward because this group over here never has time for us or is unwilling to share or whatever the thing is.
Yeah, great. I love it. Something that your 2024 report mentioned, it had to do with, it actually had to do with the partners in the job centers, not necessarily knowing who the other partners were and making kind of good, efficient referrals. So I was curious. We don't have to answer it today, but I was kind of curious if there was any kind of motion on that, if that had moved, if anything had happened between now and then. And it's something I'll be looking at, when we get into the job centers themselves. But that's exactly right, Ann. I think it's, how can we, if whoever we're trying to work with, if it's not being effective, number one, why isn't it being effective, right? And then how do we measure that? How do we know we're successful? A lot of times when we're working with especially our different federal partners, they all have different measures, right? They have different metrics. So we're trying to push along our metrics and achieve our goals. They're trying to do the same thing and achieve their goals. And the two often don't align. So trying to get it to that point is important. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, thanks. I would agree with everything that's been said thus far. A couple of things that came to mind as I was listening to people talk. In terms of metrics, conversations that are happening on the state board, in addition to the federal performance measures, and reporting to the state workforce board, there is a lot of energy around other metrics. And some of those metrics that are percolating up include things like, not surprisingly, AI proficiency. What does that mean, and how can we measure that and track that at the state board level? Employability skills, the softer skills are and have been a priority of the state workforce board for a long time. And then another one that sort of ties this and what you just said and Ann just said together, and it did come from Heather Ficht. I want to give her credit for it. way back upstream, she said, in addition to this is in so many ways, this is about customer satisfaction, right? Whether it's the employer being satisfied with engagement and services and quality of all that with the WorkSource Oregon sort of system, or it's the job seeker. The third one that Heather brought up was how could we potentially add to those two a partner satisfaction metric? Again, to Ken, your point, how do you measure that? But it does make sense at a high, sort of theory level. And I don't know if it's a general partner satisfaction metric, if that's possible. It seems kind of hard. So then you start talking about all the different partners and the metrics there. But I do think it has merit. Obviously, it needs to be fleshed out.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's some ways to accomplish that, right? But I also think we have to be careful because a lot of times those partner relationships, especially at the local level, are very much a relationship, right? It's two people that know each other, and then one of them retires and somebody new comes in and that relationship is broken. So it's all about also kind of, I'll call it succession planning in a way, but it's like, how do you succession plan a relationship, right? So yeah, some more things to think about. Go ahead, Ashley.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we think about numbers all the time and metrics, and something that I've been thinking about a lot is beyond services and outcomes. We feel like we're supporting our region to be more capable. So our people are more capable with the work that we have. The organizations in our region is more capable because of these partnerships, because of these conversations. And to your point earlier, like if a region doesn't have good jobs, the things that partners have to do on the ground is create career pathways for them. Right. So I just wonder, like, beyond numbers, like, people in jobs, how do we measure also our strength of our region and how the partnerships are supporting that?
Yep. Great. All right. I love it. Thank you for the input. That's great. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, well, our big next steps is we're going to continue. There's a couple of things. We're continuing the planning process, right? So we'll be meeting with the local workforce board directors on Monday to continue to kind of talk through that and hopefully at least get a sketch of what the convenings will look like so we can continue planning for that. We do have some SWOT analysis tools and templates that we're pulling together, kind of interview booklets and questionnaires. We're working to identify and, kind of catalog out the different programs that we want to make sure that we talk about. Separately, we are doing some data analysis on program performance just to give us an idea of how they're performing from the current metrics we have, and also so we can help identify some future metrics that we're doing. So those are some of the things that my team and I are working on in the background. Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to our chairperson to go to the next step.
Well, Todd, is there anything else on today's agenda? I think, Ken, it was really for us all to hear from you, get a chance to meet you, hear a little bit more about how things are rolling out and the plan for that. Does anyone have anything for the good of the order? Nothing coming up?
Yeah, I didn't have anything else, Ashley. I just wanted to give Ken as much time as possible to share as much as he wanted to and could about recent developments. And obviously he's done that. So I don't really have anything else other than to thank everybody for coming today and providing input to help Ken. And we look forward to working with you all as this work continues to move forward and then rolls out to the local areas. I was just telling Clay when I was on mute a few minutes ago, I want to make sure to come to several of these local convenings to better understand what's happening. I'm not sure I'm going to make it to all 9, but I'm definitely going to, commit to making it to several. And that said, and I want to follow that with, I would encourage as many of you as possible to do the same. I know that's a hard ask, but you're all super smart folks and have a lot of great input, feedback, and past and present recommendations that we value for sure at the state level and on the state workforce board. So it would be great if you can attend as many as you could possibly make. We'd certainly appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll make sure we have a schedule published of times and dates and locations. So yes, you're all invited. And Todd, I don't think it's going to be 9. I think it's going to be more like 25 convenings by the time we're all done. But
How are
that's
you
okay.
feeling about that, Ken? Is how
Yeah,
this
that's a
is all
good
shaped
question.
up from the RFP? You feeling good about it?
Oh yeah. No, I mean that's fine. My goal, we're happiest when we're talking to people where they're at, right? And I
Yeah.
think they're going to be the most open. My only concern around it is really just our timeline to get this report done.
Mhm.
It's something, I think we talked about on one of our, past meetings is that, I think it came through an email too, from one of the local directors, to have really good, robust conversations takes time.
Yeah.
And we will have those and we will have as many as we can. But we also can't do it infinitum because we've got a commitment, right? So that's
Mhm.
my only concern is not being able to get to everywhere that we want to get to because of time constraints is all.
Sure.
But given, we're gonna have looks like about 28 days on the ground. 9 regions, if we do it right, we should be able to get to a good majority of them.
Excellent. I really like the approach. It feels very different than before. I think that the communities are going to feel it too.
Yeah, we did this in Missouri a few years ago, and they're not as big geographically,
Mhm.
but at the time they had 14 local workforce areas and 28 job centers. We went to all of them. I mean,
Great.
it just takes time. When you get there, the people they want to talk, and once they know you're for real and know and can talk their talk, it's
Yeah.
hard to stop them from talking, actually.
Yeah, people like to be heard.
Mhm.
All right, great. Anyone else?
No,
How are
I
we
just,
feeling? Can we get a
I-
thumbs up, kind of a temperature check? Susie, you have something to share?
Ken, you're going to be coming to the great state of Eastern Oregon, and we are a third of the state.
Yes.
And I hope that your time and efforts are equally important here as they are into the bigger areas, because most of the times we don't feel that at all. We're the last,
Absolutely.
just like on your map, we're the last, oh, let's go out to Hinterville. I guess we got to get those people done.
I'm looking
We
forward to it.
want more from this than that.
I'm
Just-
looking forward
Just
to it.
saying. And I
Yep.
think that's somewhere that you should really drag Todd with you. When you come to Hinterville, I think that is appropriate.
Making a note. Todd, Hinterville, let's go.
The great state of Eastern Oregon. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Great meeting today. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, we will officially adjourn at 3:49 p.m. Thank you, Ken, for all you're doing. Really excited to see what's to come.
Thank you all.